Welcome to Sunflower Movement. I am your host, Ashley Buckner. Before we get started, here's a quick disclaimer. This podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. I am a licensed therapist, but unless you have a signed consent form with me, I am not your therapist. This platform is not a form of psychotherapy, counseling, or healthcare of any kind. Sunflowers bloom in the most unexpected places, and they adjust to remain connected to the sun. Metaphorically, I define these sunflower movements as experiences with people, places, and moments where we feel seen, heard, and believed. Thank you for tuning in. Hi, Happy New Year, everyone. I am excited to sit down with you today. We're a couple days into the new year, and it feels important just to connect with you all, maybe share some updates. I have a lot of submissions that have happened over the last several months of the podcast being released that I want to get to. Some are from the community questions episode that dropped a few weeks ago that I wasn't able to get to with my friend Rochelle, and I just wanted to dive in and connect with you all today. So thank you for tuning in. Unfortunately or fortunately, it's just going to be me. So hopefully that resonates. I love talking to you all. I love reading your submissions. I love catching up, connecting about all the things. I think my favorite thing about the podcast that's different than social media is I get to expand on what you're sharing with me. There's so much more to say than what can happen in a 90-second reel or on my stories. And that's my favorite part about Sunflower Movement is just the connection piece. And I just want to start by saying thank you guys. I never envisioned what happened in 2024 to happen and to go into this new year with a lot of fun ideas, a lot of new connections, a whole new community. It's incredible. And I mean, the support for Sunflower Movement has blown me away. I can't believe how many of you are tuning in and listening and talking and sharing. And it just genuinely means the world. And I hope you know that. So thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I will never say thank you enough. I am such a grateful person. Gratitude is a really important quality for me. And I like to be mindful of saying thank you and allowing others to know how much they mean to me, because I think it's the simplest things, like those comments that you guys leave that are like, this page has been so supportive for me, or the messages I get about the podcast that tell me how much things are resonating. I cannot even begin to tell you how much that means to me, and will always mean that much to me. I am only able to do what I do because I have a community of people, not only with you guys, but in my family, and my husband, my friend group. I'm very fortunate to have such a solid support system. And I know that's not true for everyone in this space, especially in the post-Mormon space. And I hold that close to my heart because I always want to be that space for you guys. I want to be someone who hears you and believes you and sees you. And I also know I'm not perfect. I've made a lot of mistakes the last several months. And I also have to share that has been an incredible growing moment for me. The times when I have felt really defeated or judgmental of myself or ashamed of maybe the things I've said and done, it has pushed me to do such a deep dive into my own being. And if you've been listening to the podcast long enough, you know that I take my own healing very seriously. I do regular brain spotting sessions with my own therapist. I'm constantly being curious and open about my activation that surfaces. And what I've realized since things went kind of crazy on social media in June, I have had the opportunity to face some demons that I don't think would have been otherwise activated without some of the things that have happened in the social media space, things that I've encountered on the podcast. Just there's been so much information. And while that's also incredible, that comes with triggers, right? And for me, and if you know me and if you work with me, those are just information. Those are just signs that something is getting stirred up in our own being, and we need to dive in and be curious and explore. And that has been the gift of 2024 for me, is I have been exploring. And as I go into 2025, I don't think I have full clarity on a lot of stuff, but I have this very big intention that that's what I'm going to keep doing. I'm going to keep being curious and open to the things that are activating for me. I honor that. I think that I'm not a big New Year's resolution girly. I used to be, but I feel that sometimes those types of resolutions are very limiting. They're very all or nothing. And so instead I go with an intention. And my intention for this new year is just to tune into the essence of what makes me human and hold more space for it and have better boundaries with how I'm navigating my relationships on social media, how I'm navigating my relationships with family, leaning into people who are supportive to me, who cheer me on, who are there on hard days, right? Just being really intentional in general about the way I'm showing up in the world and centering in on that. So that's my New Year's focus. Love to hear yours, so feel free to share that in the comments. I also wanted to give you guys a little update. So a few episodes ago, episode 11, I believe, I kind of opened up about my personal story, just kind of what led me to this space. And I talked a little bit about my relationship with my dad, and I had shared that we are estranged. So I wanted to give an update to that. We're still at this moment in time estranged. However, I think there has been some steps on my end. So a few weeks ago, I attended a celebration of life for a close family friend who was a dad, kind of passed away very unexpectedly. And just he left this incredible legacy of family. And it got me thinking, right? It really obviously got me thinking about how life is short and things can happen in a moment's time. And where am I at with my dad? How am I navigating our relationship? How if this would have been him, how would I have felt? How would I have coped with that? And it just led me to be curious and open, like I said, about the things that were getting stirred up in my own being. So I sat with it, talked to my husband about it, and I just decided that I think it's time for him and I to rebuild our relationship. I think the problem is in the past is it's always been these grand gestures of like, okay, now we're talking again and now we get to like get thrown back into the things of kids and family events, and that never really works. And so I just decided to send him a text and say like, hey dad, I'm open to getting coffee and just working on you and I rebuilding. And he said he was open to that. So we don't have anything planned yet. I think we're going to wait till things calm down a bit into the new year. I know he's traveling, so I'll keep you guys posted on that. I'm hopeful because I know my intention, which is again, just to rebuild my relationship with just him and kind of keep all of the external things out of it. I am going to be really intentional about how I focus on that relationship and my boundaries. It's too confusing for my kids. My youngest doesn't really know my dad, but my oldest did. So I'm not ready to like I said, jump back in all the way because I don't want to do that like swinging thing and have my oldest be confused. Like, why are we talking to him again? Why are we not? And I've had some my oldest has obviously asked questions about my dad, and I'm pretty honest in how I navigate that with him in a way that's obviously age appropriate. But I think it's a really good, if my dad and I can repair, I think it's a really good example for my kids to see that, repair is possible. And I hope that, and I'm going to put that energetically out into the world for my dad and I. So there's an update with that. I mean, not a huge update, but I think it also shows that I'm constantly moving as a person. I'm constantly tuning in to my own activation, my own triggers, and being curious and open and using time to reflect. Life events happen, like I said, like this passing of a close family friend, and it does shake you up a bit. And I don't think that's actually problematic. It's really good for our being. And I'm not saying that my dad and I will reconcile and we won't be estranged. I don't know where he's at. I know where I'm at, and I know what my capacity is to show up. And I also know what my boundaries are and what I'm okay with and what I'm not okay with. And I also think for my own peace, I need to know that I have done everything in my being to take steps to repair. And maybe that means we don't repair for 5 more years, I feel really solid in that place. So I wanted to share with you all and just offer a little insight into me. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Not at the moment. I'm looking forward to Sunflower Movement. I have a lot of fun ideas, a lot of interviews lined up for the podcast, but please feel free to share what you would like to hear. There is a link in the show notes that says ask me anything, tell me anything. You can also put a topic you would like to discuss in there. I love getting your guys' submissions. And on that note, I've gotten a few, and there's one I really wanted to read. It's kind of a long one, so bear with me, but it was just such a beautiful submission, and I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge it. Hi, Ashley. Thank you so much for everything you have done and are doing for all of us with religious trauma. Your videos and podcasts came in my life exactly when I needed them, and while my deconstruction journey is still in progress, it has gone more smoothly in the past several weeks. I'm amazed at the community you have built, and God, I wish I could hug every person within it. Oh, gosh, me too. And that we could all have a glass of wine together while we talk and laugh and learn and love. I don't know, guys. I'm getting like retreat vibes. Okay, sorry, pause. Anyways, that's enough gushing. I wanted to share something with you in regards to the recent video you shared on modesty, so specifically about the slut-shaming Mormons do to people who dressed immodestly. Ever since my early teen years, my mom and I have butted heads over my wardrobe. I distinctly remember going shopping with her right before I started 7th grade. I found a top that I absolutely loved. It was purple, my favorite color, striped, short sleeves, long enough to pass muster at school, and it fit me like a glove. I loved this top, but the neckline was a lowish V. Nothing scandalous, but you'd think it was a plunge down to my navel by the way my mom reacted. She immediately and emphatically shook her head and said no. I tried to argue, but she said something I will never, ever forget. You look like a slut. Yeah, my own mother. Surprisingly, that didn't lead me to being overly self-conscious of my body and my wardrobe. I knew right away that it wasn't slutty. It was perfectly fine, but it did stick with me in other ways. The word slut is triggering for me, but not because I'm afraid of being thought of that way. This may sound corny, but it triggers the warrior in me. When other people start slut-shaming me or anyone else, I fight back. I reject the notion that a girl/woman is responsible for the perverted thoughts and actions of boys and men. I refuse to accept any blame for their inability to see girls and women in the revealing attire as sexual objects, and I'm perfectly ready to die on this hill if it comes to that. My relationship with my mother has improved over the years. I'm now 34, but clothes and modesty have been a source of contention between us ever since. It probably always will be. I've learned to accept that we'll never argue, but I don't have to accept this misogynistic bullshit the church preaches about modesty. I choose to dress the way I feel the most comfortable, the most beautiful, and the most like myself. I'm sorry this turned out to be so long. I fully understand if you can't read it on the podcast. Oh, I'm reading it. And I won't feel at all hurt if you don't. But thank you for coming to my TED Talk and for the warmth and light you bring to all of us. I have full body chills and I'm kind of getting a little teared up. This was so beautifully written. To have whoever wrote it, please DM me. I would love to connect on a deeper level. I would love to get that glass of wine with you and maybe chat about doing some sort of community retreat for everyone that's in this community. I think I feel you so much on the slut shaming. It has ignited a warrior within me too. And that wasn't always the case. And I'm like, as I was reading, I wanted to be you as a teenager. I love the empowerment piece you talk about. And I think what I really want to point out, I mean, there's so many things I want to point out from the submission, but the part where you're like, it triggers that warrior in me. And to me, that's activation, right? And why I love the word activation versus trigger is activation is just like this energy that we have, and it's not positive or negative. A lot of times it gets positive or negative judgments placed on it, but it's just a feeling. It's something inside of our being, and that activation can motivate us and propel us to do lots of things in our life, like advocacy, standing up for misogyny, not letting someone else be bullied, right? All of those things. And I think you highlight that so beautifully, that when someone says the word slut, what that activates in you is this energy to show up differently in the world and stand up for injustice. And I think that is so incredibly powerful. And I would say that is also what comes up for me when I hear it. I don't have the shame that I used to have when I was in high school, when I was called a slut. That would devastate my soul. Like, it would literally, like, it was a knife to the heart. And it's so beautiful for me to come, 18 years later to this place where, like, you're going to call me a slut, I'm going to tell you how I feel about it. And it's very empowering for my high school self. And I love that you've always had that. I also wanted to talk about your mom, because for me, and I see this so often in Mormon culture, and just, I think, purity culture, high control religious culture, where women are essentially the perpetrator, right? They're a part of this oppressive system, which if you've been following me, you know I talk about this, but they're a part of the oppressive system. So they become the oppressor as a way to survive. And what comes up for me when you put on that shirt and you felt so confident and so proud of yourself is your mom was activated. That was very distressing for her because she doesn't feel that in her own being. And so the fact that you do was very upsetting for her. But most people don't have the interoception to recognize that that is their own woundedness coming up. And so they project it back outwardly. And that's what happened is she took it out on you. And it sounds like she continues to take it out on you. And what I want to say is keep showing up the way you are. I want to read that. I want to reread this line for everyone because I think for me, this is what the magic is about shedding modesty, purity culture. And it's about wearing what you want. I'm going to reread it. I choose to dress the way I feel the most comfortable, the most beautiful, and the most like myself. That's how we should feel when we get dressed every single day as women. And it does not matter whether we're wearing a crop top, a long sleeve shirt, a dress, pants. It doesn't matter. It should be for us and our self-expression. And I love that you're doing that. I love that that's how you're showing up in the world. And I just keep doing it. I also want to say thank you for the incredibly kind words that you said in here. It kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about those little messages that I get. And so reading the submission just met my heart. And like when I'm having days, because I obviously am human, you guys, I have days where I question myself, like, what am I doing? Like, what the fuck am I doing? I'm talking about the Mormon church. They're going to come after me, all these crazy thoughts. And then I get messages like this, or another message that tells me how seen and heard they felt. And I'm like, this is why I'm doing it. This is why it matters. People need to know that they're not alone and that the things that they're feeling are real and normal and valid, So I just thank you. Thank you for taking the time to connect with me and writing this long submission. You are such a good writer, and I would love to hear more. So connect with me in whatever capacity feels supportive to you. Another submission that I received a while back and I haven't had a moment to get to. I'm currently in a relationship with a guy who is 27, wants to be part of the Mormon religion, but doesn't want to follow all the rules and is ready to get married. I have so many thoughts on this. We'll get back. I'm 23, have only ever dated this guy, and my heart is completely out of the religion. From the beginning of our relationship, I made it clear to him that I had no interest in being a Molly Mormon or even really participating in the religious practices, such as going to church with him, praying at his family functions, or following any of the rules that are a part of the religion. I grew up in the religion and would have classified myself as a pretty devout member until going on a mission and learning about the history and policies that I didn't agree with morally. For almost a year, our relationship was fine, and he seemed okay with me not being a part of the religion. We even talked about marriage and our future together. His parents, who are strict and devoted to the religion, found out that I wasn't going to church. He had been lying to them that I was, and that we were being intimate sexually with each other. He then, out of the blue, what felt like to me, broke up with me, saying that he didn't think we could work together long term if we weren't 100% in the church together. I even talked with his parents, who had some nasty things to say about me, solely based on the fact that I wasn't attending church anymore, and they told me that I shouldn't be in a relationship with their son because they wanted someone who would have good morals for him and wouldn't tempt him to do worldly and sinful things. Whew, there's a lot here. I'm gonna keep going. We've since gotten back together because I've started going to church with him and saying prayers with him at family functions and whatnot. And he has now bought a ring, and we plan to get married soon. I need some advice on how to proceed in the situation because I love this guy so much and we align on everything but the church. I don't want to feel like the church can take one more thing that I love, but I feel like I have to lie about who I am authentically in order to be chosen to be loved long term. My boy does love me and doesn't try to change who I am in any aspects. He just seems like he wants me to put on the show and image to make his parents and I guess him happy. And I haven't changed at all who I am as a person since being back together. I still do all the sinful things I was doing before. I think he has a lot of religious trauma to unpack, and while he says he wants a future and a family in the church, I don't know if he actually does or if he just is doing it all as a way to please his parents. How do I move forward with him when I feel like he somewhat is keeping me stuck in an emotionally triggering environment? Okay. Thank you for submitting that. I'm sure this one's going to bring up a lot of feelings for a lot of people. And I mean this so gently to this person. There are several red flags for me that come up. I think what I just really want to invite you to be curious about is how does it feel to show up inauthentically? Like, how does it feel in your being to go attend church, to quote unquote put on this image, because that's essentially a condition in being in this relationship with him? I think that's a really important thing to reflect on. And I know you love him. This isn't about love. Like, you love him. I'm sure he loves you. And also, there's a lot of things that are coming up and showing up to me that I would proceed very cautiously in before choosing to get married. And one thing I really would invite you to reflect on when you make a commitment with your partner, yes, like you're kind of embracing their family, but you're also setting a foundation for your own family. Like, what is important to your family unit? And unfortunately, I think because of what high control religion does to how we feel about ourselves and we're obedient to the religion, we're obedient to our parents, people often are living for their parents and not for their current families. And that's been just a personal boundary for me, not even related to the church, but how I set boundaries with my own family is, and my in-laws, I am living for my kids in the here and now. Me and my husband and my kids and the family unit we want to create. And that means that I'm going to disappoint and let down my parents, my in-laws, people by saying no or doing things that they don't want to do. And that's still very important to me because at the end of the day, it's going to be this current family, my kids and I. I love my parents, and they're also, I'm hopefully going to outlive them, right? And that I'm building my legacy. And if I'm making choices and decisions to live for them, how am I building my legacy in the here and now? And that's what I invite you to be super curious about, because it sounds like to me, your boyfriend, potential fiance, is pretty dysregulated by the way his parents see him. And so he's then making choices and decisions for them versus your relationship. And I'm not saying that doesn't mean you guys can't be together, but I think he needs to take care of some of his own shit and work on his own stuff before you guys enter a committed long-term relationship. You are also 23 years old. And I wish somebody was saying this to me when I was 23-year-olds. Actually, maybe people were saying this to me at 23 and I wasn't listening. Actually, I was younger, but that's neither here nor there. Your brain is not going to be fully developed probably for, another 5-6 years. And that I think is really important information. A lot of times people are making long-term decisions before their brain is fully developed, and not saying that you can't make a long-term decision before that time, but there is no rush. I mean, obviously I think there's pressure because of like this religious element, but it doesn't sound like you need to get married right away. I mean, I would encourage you to sit with that. I think I want to also share a story because this came up for me when I was reading your submission. When I first went to college, I left Cedar City, Utah, moved to Los Angeles, and I came back for breaks, obviously, and I met a guy at a party. And I knew who he was because it's a small town. So I knew he was like a return missionary, but he was drinking at this party. And so I was very intrigued by that. And long story short, we started dating. And what was so incredibly confusing for me now as I've like looked back and dissected this relationship was how we would do, quote unquote, all those sinful things. But then he would still like be adamant about his beliefs in the church. And that was just incredibly dysregulating for my nervous system. I didn't know that at the time. But it turned out that this relationship didn't work out, thankfully, for both of us. I was not a good girlfriend to him, and I'm just going to own that because I wasn't. I was like this 19-year-old girl deconstructing faith unconsciously, attending a university, experimenting with alcohol, and wanting to have sex with my Mormon boyfriend. I mean, it was so complicated, right? There was a lot of things going on. But I wish that at that time I would have recognized it for what it was, that we were both very confused. He was clearly very confused to be okay doing certain things with me that were against his religion, but then still wanting to go to church and get married in a temple. Like, I think that to me is a red flag, and not because he's a bad guy, but because he has his own shit that he was going through, and so did I, and we were not ready to be in a committed relationship. And I am thankful every single day, because there was a time where I was, and my college friends will tell you that I was like, I'm going to go home and get married to him. I mean, that was programmed into my being. That's what I needed to do. And I just had really great college friends who were like, Ash, you're not going home to get married. That's so stupid, right? So I didn't. And I'm thankful every day that I didn't, because I wouldn't be okay. I know I wouldn't be okay. I know that there would have been so much more trauma that came up. It would have impacted my mental health significantly. We wouldn't have had a healthy marriage at all. And not because he was a bad guy or I was a bad person. I mean, I think I would, if I saw him, like he's a good person, I'm a good person, but we weren't good for each other because we were so young. We were still working through a lot of our own demons. And I don't think we were okay. And I know we weren't okay because of the religion. I would just really invite you to tune into that. Like, how confusing it has to be for his nervous system to have sex with you, do all the things with you, all the quote unquote sinful things, and then go to church on Sunday and put on a face like he's not doing those things. That is dysregulating for our nervous system. That's confusing. It impacts us on an unconscious level. So there's a lot going on there. I think that at the end of the day, it's really, this is about you and tuning into you and what you need and what your nervous system needs. And there's no judgment. I don't think that you need to break up with him, right? I think this is such a personal journey. I think there's some red flags that you should be curious about and aware of. And I also know this, like, when we can work together with the people we're dating and the people we love, and we can have really hard conversations, that's where so much growth can happen. I had a therapist tell me this once, because my now husband and I obviously went through our shit before we got married, and he did something that, well, maybe I'll get into it another time, but it really upset me. And my therapist said, sometimes people have to make like a big mistake to really shake things up and like wake up. And that's exactly what happened. And going through hard things doesn't mean a relationship's going to work out. But I think it's really important that you don't sacrifice yourself. Anyways, that was a very long-winded answer. So thank you for listening and submitting. I appreciated reading your question. All right, here's some more submissions from the Community Connections episode that I didn't get to. I separated from my abusive ex a little over 2 years ago. Less than a year after our divorce, he was engaged to one of the people he cheated on me with. I'm just struggling with feeling not good enough and the grief of losing my best friend, even though I'm glad I'm not with him anymore. I'm feeling very confusing feelings. I hold space for you. This has to hurt. I mean, I think it's human to hurt in this situation. To know that he's now going to marry the person that he cheated on with you is absolutely impacting you. And that's okay. And that's so valid. And I think what's really hard for us as humans is to hold space for both, right? You're having these feelings of like, I'm actually really happy I'm not with him anymore, and I'm glad that I'm not going to marry him, but that this also really hurts and I don't know what to do with it. And honestly, it's just about acknowledging and holding space for both, that two things can be true, that you can grieve the loss of him and be hurt by his choices, and also know that you don't want to be with him. And I think leaning into the grief and holding space for it and honoring it gives you more of that clarity too. I think when we feel certain things like this piece of it hurting, our immediate reaction is to want to shove it down and make it go away because, oh, like that's icky. I don't want to be wishing that I was with him or longing for him or whatever that was, right? Like that feels so gross, but the act of shutting it down just makes it stronger and stronger. And it's just like I've been saying quite a bit today, it's just information. It's just saying, oh, like there's still some wounds in there to hold space for. And there might always be wounds because you loved him and you cared about him. And this might be activating a loss, and that's okay. And so just inviting yourself towards that and being curious and open to it. What you're feeling is valid. And I think feeling confusing is hard, but hold space for the confusion too. Because are you feeling confused because you're actually confused? Or are you feeling confused because you're judging that you are grieving him? Does that make sense? Anyways, sit with that, see where it takes you. Stay curious and open. You guys are going to hear me say that all the time because curiosity and openness really offers so much, such a softer approach for how we reflect on what's happening in our own being. And obviously it comes from brain spotting. If you are a brain spotting client of mine, you know how often I say that, but it is the mantra that has saved saved me in terms of how I navigate emotions. If I can soften and be curious, especially to the really hard emotions that we feel like shame, if I can get soft with shame and be curious to it versus judge it or berate it or make it go away because I don't like the way it feels, I move through the emotion and the feeling in a much quicker way. So just inviting that curiosity in. All right, another submission. 2 parts. Ending a relationship where there's no obvious big stuff, no abuse, addiction, but where there's still a long history of dysfunction, pain, mostly unintentional hurt, emotional separation, and disconnection. It feels harder to justify this. Any insights or opinions? Second part, is it common or normal for there to be just too much between 2 people? Of course, all of this is 100% mixed and made worse by the church and lifestyle differences. You know, I think there's so much here. And what comes up for me initially is just recognizing that sometimes we need breaks from people. And I always say this, nothing is permanent aside from death. And because you guys ended and need some time and space to work through things doesn't mean you cannot reconnect. I was talking about this with a client recently about how is this person showing up in the here and now right now? What information are they giving to you? Are they getting help for the things that maybe they bring to the relationship that are unhealthy? And then same question to you, because I define a healthy relationship as 2 independent people coming together, showing up as the best version of themselves. And sometimes we can't do that if we haven't done our own inner work. So how is this person showing up in the here and now? And inviting them, encouraging them to do the inner work, and then you doing the same as well. So that then if you guys do circle back again in the future, you have reconnected, you've reestablished where you're at, you have done your own work and have the capacity to show up better. I think it's also okay to recognize that maybe we're not the right people together. And that doesn't mean you don't love and care about them. I think about an ex that I have who we were not in a healthy relationship. And I would say he was probably more emotionally abusive. And I still have so much love in my heart for him because he was such a huge part of my life. And he was my first boyfriend that wasn't Mormon. And there was just so much wrapped up in that. Like I actually felt like I quote unquote had to have I got to have a legitimate relationship. And I'm also really grateful I'm not with him anymore, but I still loved him. If I saw him, I would give him a hug, like, because people come into our lives and show up in ways, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with caring about people. And 2 things can be true. We can care about them and love them and also realize they're not the right person for us. So I don't know if that even resonates at all. I think the other thing is that's so important to just really tune into, which I was saying earlier, is unfortunately, when you grow up in a high control religion like Mormonism, there is so much trauma, and trauma really impacts how we show up in the world with other people and in our relationships. And I'm going to go back to that relationship I was talking about when I was in college. I had so much trauma I was not even aware of in my nervous system related to high control religion that there was no way I was going to be a healthy girlfriend or partner for the person I was dating. And the same was true for him. And I'm not going to speak on his trauma, right? But like, that's also what comes up for me. Like, until we dive in and do some of our own inner work, it's really hard to show up in our relationships. And I think about my current relationship with my husband, and I met him after doing a full year of some deep dives into my being. And I still don't got it all figured out, but it was such a different way to enter a relationship than prior, because obviously I'd grown up in this culture. It's like, oh, I need to find a husband. I need a boyfriend. Like, that's what my value was. So I was always just dating, like always had a boyfriend, needed a boy to be interested in me, needed a guy to be interested in me. Anyways, and then I like ended that with that abusive ex, and I spent a full year just unpacking and diving into my own shit. And when I met my husband, it was a different experience. And we still had our ups and downs. You know, there were still things that we had to go through, but I had a new foundation within my own self to navigate it. So I don't know if that helps. I just like to offer it. I think nothing has to be permanent, and to do what feels right for your being, that's so important. So thank you for submitting. Okay, last one I want to dive into. How do I get over the rejection I'm receiving from my parents? I haven't gone home in a year now, and we rarely exchange any conversation except through a family group chat and a quick side hug from dad at a family wedding. I know it won't change, and I want that to be okay, but I'm not okay with it. Whenever I see the word get over, if you've been listening to my podcast, you know how I feel about that. I don't think there are things that we get over. And our fight, our desire to get over it, it's that piece, right? We don't want to hold space for that hard feeling of what it feels like to be rejected by your own parents, by your own flesh and blood. That is so incredibly painful. So our initial reaction, which is protective in nature, is like, I got to get rid of this shit. I got to stop feeling this. And to stop feeling it means you are not human. It hurts because you're human, because you want your parents to not reject you. And that, oh God, that's so painful. And that's also okay. And how do we get to like maybe more regulation around that feeling? We feel it. We allow ourselves to really notice how it shows up in our being, how that rejection feels, and allow it to move. Almost like, again, like you're being curious and open to it, talking to it like you would a friend, getting to know it, letting it say like, God, this hurts so much. I just want my mom and dad to love me. Or love me in the way I need to be loved, right? Like all of those things, like let it have time and space. Give that feeling respect, because it deserves respect. And what I want to point out is the rejection you feel from your parents, you're rejecting that feeling. Like you're rejecting your own feelings. Does that make sense? Like, which is also why it's so activating too. And it's why you quote unquote can't get over it, because you're not giving it space to come up. And you're probably listening like, yes, I am giving it space. I feel it all the time. Right. And feeling it all the time doesn't mean we're actually moving through it. We might be feeling it and then shutting it down because we don't like the way it feels. So leaning into it, being curious and open about it, like, and allowing yourself to grieve and knowing you might grieve for your whole life. I think you're going to. I think it'll always hurt that your parents reject you because you chose to leave the church. That's always going to hurt. And I can't change that for you. And you can't change that for you, but you can hold space for it. You can honor it. You can honor that hurt. And when it shows up, just acknowledging it, noticing like, yeah, this hurts because I'm human and it's a crappy thing. And it's okay to want my parents to be different. I believe that we grieve and we make meaning out of our grief, and we move forward and we experience more regulation around the triggers and activation that we have in our life. And we often wish forever that it didn't happen. And that's okay. I invite you to hold space for that. Just allow, again, both things to be true, that you can move forward and also still be sad. That's what comes up for me. Anytime I hear get over, I don't want to have this feeling anymore, that feeling is just going to get louder and stronger until we hold space for it. And it might mean that in certain family situations, you have to set some intentional boundaries for yourself of just like checking in and tuning into your own nervous system and grounding yourself and anchoring yourself to work through the activation. So for example, if you know you're going to go and be in a family setting and your parents aren't going to treat you, they're going to treat you like with this like little side hug, noticing that probably creates some distressing feelings. And then can you tune into your nervous system, tune into your body, and can you find a place that feels maybe more grounded? Like maybe it's your feet. Maybe your feet feel really anchored. Like you have this like icky feeling in your chest and your feet feel super anchored on the earth. And as you feel that icky feeling when you're around your parents, just go down to your feet, feel the earth beneath it, and just notice that and hold yourself there. And that's just a supportive way to create some regulation in your nervous system, where you hold space for the ick in your heart, but then also you ground into your feet and just let that be there for you. I think that's a really nice tool to try to implement when we're in distressing situations and we can't really feel that grief because it's too strong, especially when dad's giving us a side hug in the here and now. I love your guys' submissions. I love being able to read them and dive into them and sit with them. I don't have all the answers. This is not therapy. I think though, like it's almost like we're having a conversation and talking about things that are hard to navigate. And I think there's power in just putting it out there. So that's also what I want to say is these submissions are landing for someone else. I know they are, because you are not alone and someone else needs to hear this too. So thank you. Thank you all for writing in. Thank you for sharing your heart with me, your hard things, your beautiful things. I am so proud to hold space for you. I'm so proud of this community. I'm so honored just for what's happened the last several months. I could have never, I genuinely, you guys, I could have never envisioned this for my life. And if you would have asked me, even when I opened my therapy practice in Utah, that this is what I would be doing, I would have been like, no, no, no. And that's how life works. Things just come into our field as they're meant to. And it's been really actually healing for me in a way that I didn't know I realized. Little me, who grew up in this culture, who had so much shame and pain and trauma and unworthiness, feels so empowered and seen and heard. And I feel like I'm giving her the voice that she never knew how to have. And that is incredibly powerful. Thank you for tuning in today. Happy New Year. Take care of yourselves. Keep writing in. And I can't wait until next time. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If today's content resonated with you, please share, leave a review, all the things. It would mean so much to me.